Hello and welcome to the first episode of 2025 of Mastering Dungeons, your favorite tabletop role-playing game. News, interviews, reviews, game design, all the stuff tabletop role-playing game plus. I'm Shawn Merwin here with Teos Abadia sporting the Duke shirt. Hey Teos, what's going on?
Can it even be seen? There we go. A lot is going on. I have been. So yesterday, I disassembled the entire Christmas apparatus of our house. It became a mundane home. I survived again being on ladders. We took our second kid off to the airport, so we are now kidless once more. I'm not going to cry.
No.
But it's always so we did it all at once. It was like the giant band-aid of staring at the room that is empty, not only of people, but of Christmas accoutrement and joy. And then we watched all the things we wanted to watch without anyone interrupting us. So there's some, upsides, but
ups and downs there.
The kids are already missed. So how about on your end? What's going on? What's the deal?
I was suffering serious burnout working through Christmas, working right up until New Year's Day. And then with a little bit of time off, my wife and I took a little trip to Las Vegas to see some sights, some national parks, catch a sporting event, catch a show, and just chill out. So I am back, not burnt out, but then life implodes, right? It's like, oh, I forgot to do this, and oh, the car needs this, and oh, that, and it's like you take even a millisecond off, and
Yeah.
it's So my 2025 is off to a calm / hectic start.
Yeah.
But we are here. That's the important thing.
Yes, we are.
We are here to talk gaming, and we do so for our listeners.
Yeah.
And sometimes those listeners talk back to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so this first one, I believe you put in, Teos, and I'm not sure who asked the question.
Oh, you're right.
Where.
I missed that part. I'm going to have to find out who it was. Oh, yeah, that's I think it's because this was our first show notes for the year. So apologies to the person who will be nameless for now, but I will hunt it down and put in the show notes. Pretty sure it was through YouTube, but I could be wrong. So yes, there was a question from a person who is wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so this is what wonderful person via some incredible piece of technology is asking. How do you feel? How do you both feel about the new crafting rules in 2024? In particular, the idea of players crafting their own magical equipment. I have seen what I believe to be a lot of misinformation being spread about creators or by creators about this topic. I've read both the 2024 PHB and DMG, and the only rules I can find about players crafting items is in the PHB under crafting equipment. Using the rules below, characters can make non-magical items, potions of healing, and spell scrolls. I highlighted non-magical because, as far as I can find rules as written, players cannot craft magic items other than potions of healing and spell scrolls. The only other section I see any information about crafting magic items is through the Bastion system. Presuming I am correct in my findings, does this not mean that rules as written crafting magic items is an optional rule that is coupled with the Bastion system? Additionally, with the Artificer UA being out, crafting magic items is a huge part of what the new Artificer does. If everyone can make magic items, wouldn't that seriously infringe on what the new Artificer is supposed to be about? Would love to hear both of your or any guest thoughts on this topic. Okay, Teos, tell us.
I'm going to start with, it was Chris G8989 via YouTube. Whew.
There you go. Thank you, Chris.
Thank goodness, internet. Thank you, YouTube search capability. So, I did a video on crafting, which did cover what the DMG says in the player's handbook for crafting magic items. Link in my show notes. Find it on my channel through alphastream.org. And it is more than bastions. So Chris, good news. There is actually a way to handle this per the rules, though you may or may not like it. The PCs can craft potions of minor healing and scrolls, as mentioned in the player's handbook, and they can also use the rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide to craft magic items of all kinds. The way it works in a quick brief summary is half the cost of the magic item's sale cost, and the cost is based on rarity, and there's a table in the DMG for that. So half of it to craft it, and then you can sell it at the cost, which is different than mundane items, where you're usually selling it at half cost when you found it in the dungeon, but full cost if you have a market for it, if that makes sense. So that's what it's presuming here, is magic items are sold at their actual cost, crafted for half. Your PC needs to be trained in Arcana no matter what, as well as up to one assistant who could help shorten the time, and they would have to be trained as well. The PC must also have proficiency in a tool based on the item type. So like if you're making a ring, it's jeweler's tools. And if the item casts a spell, you must have that spell prepared each day of crafting. Time and money are based on rarity. An uncommon item is 10 days and 200 gold. A very rare, just as examples, 125 days and 20k gold. So this may or may not be what you love as a system. In particular, how the DM controls whether you can craft is a little tenuous here. So it says you decide as DM if the materials are available, with the base chance being 75% in a city, 25% in other settlements, and if the answer is no, check again in a week. That's really different than 2014, Shawn, where it said, hey, for a magic item, you decide if it needs, the claws of a manticore, and you've got to go on a quest to find that. Here, they're just taking that all out. There's none of that specific ingredient stuff, and it's supposed to be what the player could argue if they read the DMG is, hey, dude, my chance should be 75% that I can craft this week, and if not, I roll again next week. So, 2 weeks, I should be able to craft this thing, or start the crafting and get my super powerful, whatever I need to make my build of awesomeness. So,
right.
You may have to have those discussions. And one of the things I did in the video is say, like, a big part of this crafting is the process of talking to your players and working out a deal with them.
Right. And the very idea that they are now putting this out and giving percentage chances and giving basically permission for the players to create without necessarily the game master saying, yes, this is cool, makes it harder for a game master to say no.
Yeah.
And it's already hard to say no without having the rules say yes for something that, even going back to the original 2014 version, we were told where magic items are not necessary.
Yeah.
You can totally play the game with the correct power level with no magic items. So therefore, the addition of any magic items therefore makes it more powerful.
Yes. Yeah.
And we still don't know. I'm hearing mixed things about play tests of adventures using the new rules and the new encounter creation guidelines from the Dungeon Master's Guide. And we don't even have monsters yet. So, and as we'll talk about in our main segment today, monsters, creating monsters, the new monster manual, and so on. All of this is still in flux as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
We still need to see, and we will do a segment in a later episode about equipment in general and what equipment means to the game. So I'm going to save any more talk about magic items and where they fit in the game for that. But I hope that answers the question.
One last thing I'll add is the question that was brought up around, is this now bound into the optional system of Bastion? So no, it's not. How optional it is depends on how you want to read these words in the DMG. They are in the DMG. I mean, you are the DM, so you always control it. Everything is up to you. But your players may read the DMG and feel otherwise. With Bastions, which is also one of those optional systems, but presumed that you can give it to your players. Again, it's up to you to decide when Bastions kick in, how they get it. But if they had it, what the benefit would be is getting that assistant that can help with the crafting. Right. An assistant halves the time, so it'll speed up how often they can get things. Something that isn't covered in the rules that's really interesting is this question of, if you have more than one assistant, which some Bastions provide, can they help? And that's supposed to be a DM call on whether they can. So you could, if you want to make crafting faster, do that. And if you don't, be prepared for your players to maybe suggest that, and you need to explain how you feel about it.
Right. And the elimination of downtime as sort of a factor in this complicates it, because now if one player is that player who's, oh, I need these three particular magic items to have the perfect character, then story wise you have the other players who are like, we just want to adventure. That takes away that thing that they could have done. Oh, I'm going to carouse for a week and make this roll.
Right.
It makes it a little more odd.
Agreed. It used to be a little more of imbalance. It was one of the options you could take. Is it really worth to have a chance to get an item, and that might come with complications or rivals or whatever, when you could unlock secrets or train this companion you got or any number of other things. It's also worth mentioning that crafting has no failure chance in these rules. They didn't in 2014 either, but it makes it all the more kind of an automatic thing you're doing. And there's no complications or rivals types things the way there used to be in 2014 with those rules for downtime.
Yep. Our next question actually comes from a couple different folks in different ways. So the question as it is written here is from Matt Maker via Bluesky. But I've also been asked a similar question by Ben Rook, so I'm going to try to answer both. And this was based on just an offhanded post I made on Bluesky about when you're designing, you can design a good system for a one shot, and that's great, or a small series of adventures. But you have to put a little more thought into the design if you want the rules, the system to be useful for repeated play. And naturally I got, well, what it makes that as a designer, what do you think makes a game appropriate for several years long campaigns? What separates a fun one-shot game from a fun campaign game? And it's a great question. And we've touched on it several times as we've spoken over the years, but I think we'll start with the standard caveat of all players and all campaigns are different. I could find a group that would be happy meeting once a week for 4 hours to play a Candyland-based role-playing game, even though all we're doing is picking cards, because we can tell stories and we can goof around and we can do these different things. So everything I'm about to say, I know there are people out there going, but my group, but yes, but you are your own special flower. And as a whole, there is an audience out there that will fit some of these criteria. And the easy answer is diversity and complexity in your play of the game. And therefore, the rules need to enhance, need to draw out, need to encourage that diversity and complexity of play.
Yeah.
So what sorts of diversity and complexity are we talking about? The first would be a diversity of play styles being allowed to thrive within the game. There's a reason why we can say, here are the 7 player types, or here are the 3 player types and 5 sub-player types. Because D&D is a game where those different player types cannot just find fun with each other, but they can find fun intermingling with each other. So if I have a group of full-on power gamers, they can have a fun game, but I can also take a power gamer, a storyteller, an actor, right, and put them together in the same party and still have fun with these D&D rules, because the rules themselves promote types of play that they can all engage with or engaged with together.
Yeah.
Does that sound correct to you, Teos?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, because I hadn't thought about the player type angle, but it's true that you have the breadth to interact more along those various lines of what you like and to please them differently A one shot is trying to create a very finite experience, right? And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
everything it's doing is coordinating along those paths. So it'll say something like, you're on a mission to do blah, and you must, get to the temple and stop the ritual. And then we're done. We have done that. And so everything must drive towards that conclusion, or we're going to end up feeling like, well, we never got to the ending. And so if the, instigator wants to instigate off to one side, and the, explorer wants to go find the lore of something else, well, we're not going to get to the end, and that will. So normally players know we've got to get to this end piece, and even though we might tickle all of our fancies, we will
Hmm.
still go towards that end conclusion. And because that one shots are great ways to show off a game, right? Like I did a one shot of Deadlands before starting a campaign, even though it was a 2-session, 3-session kind of game. It was a way to kind of experience the setting and see if we liked it, and then we could go into something bigger. With something bigger, we can then aspire to do things like have plans that we independently are developing, right? One player might want to do X or Y. Another one might particularly dig into this part of the story and setting and adventure and expand it because they start doing things with it, right?
Hmm.
And so there are those opportunities to have a bigger experience, and not everything you have, going back to the specifics of this question, not everything you have lends itself to that.
Hmm.
Some adventures that we get don't have a lot of material to expand. Like if we think of, say, like Against the Giants, right? The
Hmm.
classic series, it
Right.
really truly zeroes in on each of the giant layers and very little
Hmm.
else. We don't know a lot about what the kingdoms are thinking, the
Right.
very few NPCs with the kingdoms, and it's all meant to be left behind and just
Mhm.
go murder all these giants and unravel the secrets. So there's only so much to expand upon, right? Not that you
Right.
can't make a big campaign out of it. In fact, it is a campaign because of its size, but nothing about it is making it feel vastly different than a one shot. And that is something you would have to bring to it.
Hmm. And I will separate now a a game that's appropriate for campaign play as
Hmm.
opposed to one shots, and individual adventures that are suitable for one shot versus suitable for a long-term campaign. And we could talk about both.
Yeah. Yeah.
My original thing was about a game system particularly,
Yeah. Fair.
but what you say is absolutely true. And so I see the Alien role-playing game,
Hmm.
even though I don't know if we've seen the full hardcover book yet.
Yeah. No, so we don't have the second edition out yet, but the first one's
Okay.
out, and it has I forget the names of this now, something like dramatic play versus cinematic play. And one of them
Right.
is it's actually great for this question, right? They thought about this, right? Because they're
Hmm.
thinking, here's a game where you might die at any moment. So
Right.
doesn't that mean that you can't play campaigns? And so what they did is create two different modes of play. And in one of them, you are much more resilient and able to deal with things. But in I think the dramatic system or whatever it's called, sorry, folks, for forgetting this. I've played it a lot of times, but I forget the names.
Yeah.
But in that particular mode, um, things will happen that sort of override your character, right? Like you just lose it because of fear or whatever, and you start gunning down your friends. Because the point is, this is a one shot and it should end like the movies with wild things. And the android in your party is probably against you, or at least you're afraid it is. Surprise, maybe it isn't.
Mhm.
It was last time I played. And, one of you will probably, like I did, blow up the ship and murder everybody because that contains the problem. And,
Right.
so those are the game itself did that versus having another mode where you don't have those
Right.
same pieces to try to make it fair.
And the fact that the game itself recognized that you need two modes of play with maybe a similar chassis, but very different circuitry within
Yeah.
that game
Yeah.
goes to show what I'm talking about with this. You need these two different things. Um, uh, the next thing on my list is a diversity of story elements.
Mm.
So what I'm talking about there is there are certain games that where you can tell a certain kind of story. Then there are certain games that expand that out so you can tell a variety of different stories. And what I'm thinking of now is Call of Cthulhu.
I was thinking
And
the
it's
same.
not that It's not that Call of Cthulhu is a game where you cannot play a campaign in. But you are definitely confined to a certain kind of story with the system, at least with the base Call of Cthulhu basic role playing rules. Uh, and you see this all the time. And I just experienced it the other day with my daughter, who is in a D&D group, and they've been playing a campaign here and a campaign there. And then they decided, let's try Call of Cthulhu because Wizards has done all these horrible things. Let's try to support another game. And I knew what was coming. As you know, so she came home from the first session and she was like, "Oh, it was kind of fun. We did these different because they were making characters, and which is fun." And then they get to the second session, she comes home and she's like, "Yeah, that didn't go great." And I'm like, "Yes, because you are a bunch of D&D players who expect to be able to tell certain kinds of stories, and now you're stepping into a game where it's not like roll for initiative and we're going to spend 30 minutes in a combat. This is now very complex, clue driven,
Yeah.
mystery solving storytelling, which doesn't tickle everyone's fancy for a full campaign.
Right.
So the story you're telling and the play styles that the game supports do not invite this longer term campaign
Yeah.
without really digging into a particular type of story or a particular kind of play style.
And there are longer Call of Cthulhu campaigns, right, that are
For
actually
sure.
quite well known and well regarded. But, we were asking somebody, like this came up when we were discussing possible campaigns in my home group. And someone said, well, I've got Orient Express, Murder on the Orient Express. I forget the exact name
Yeah.
of it. My memory's apparently blown
Yeah.
today. But someone said, but wait, I mean, Call of Cthulhu is always this rhythm of something's going on. I investigate, I find what it is, and I probably die trying to stop it. So
Mhm.
how does that work, on this train long campaign? And they're like, well, there are a lot of people on the train, so you can have other characters. And I'm like, okay, sure.
Yep.
you,
Yep. Yep.
you know, I can die horribly finding something out, and then the next person on the train that I roll up can continue doing explorations. And I don't know that that's entirely true. So, feel free to tell us
Yeah.
how it really works when Murder on the Orient Express. But yeah, for sure. The game has this particular rhythm to it that makes it fantastic for short experiences and more of a challenge for longer ones, right?
Yeah. Yep. And so complexity on the complexity side, there needs to be, for me at least, as I've seen over the years, a complexity of play that allows people to expand their experience based on their desires.
Mhm.
So if it's, we hear about dread, right? The Jenga
Mhm.
tower, you pull the thing. That is a great convention experience, a great one-shot experience to feel that tension, to feel that. That is not a system that you would want to say, okay, we're going to meet every week and
Mhm.
play that game because it is not designed that way.
Mhm.
Could that randomizer, could that bit of game mechanics be used? Possibly, but there's only so much you can do with that.
Mhm.
You would need to add a bunch of complexity of different ways to engage with that in order to truly make that something that you would want to play every week for 50 weeks.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. And we can see with things like when we talked about Daggerheart, right? The attempt that it made to not be just about these sort of one shots and just your
mhm.
powers while giving you thrilling capabilities for your characters. It worked really hard to try to say, and you will build the world together and you will lay down the
Yeah,
seeds for what your character wants to do. Those are all things the game is trying to do to offset the sort of one shotness of maybe the build character system, right?
for sure, for sure. And that leads to the final one, which is the chance to grow
Mm,
your character, the chance to grow the world, the chance to change the story, and the chance to expand the rules as your
mm,
character expands. Uh, so we see things like Demon Lord and Weird Wizard. Rob was very smart by saying this game is meant to be played for 10 sessions.
Yeah.
And by doing that, he eliminated that need to make so many rules, to make so many expansive adjustments to your character that D&D has to do and gets into trouble because it has to do. So you can just go level 1 to 10 and you can level everything and you're always getting one cool thing that you can add to the character to make it fun to be continuing to
Yeah.
play. uh and so that's that. Put those two games in this list as a good balance
Hmm.
between those things. Uh, because when you do have to expand, when you do have to support that ever growing need for updating and keeping fresh your character and the rules, uh, you can avoid a lot of trouble having to do too much.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Great example.
So that was sort of my top four things. Uh, did you have any additions to that?
No, I love the four that you use. That's a really nice capture of it. I don't know that I can add anything else that I haven't already said. I love the
Cool.
question. It's a fun way to think about it. And
Mhm.
I'm curious how often someone creates a role playing game or even a fifth edition variant without thinking through this question. So it's a very astute question as well.
Yeah. Yep. And so thank you to Matt and to Ben Rook and to uh 8989 something
Chris?
something. Yeah, Chris, thank you for those questions and keep them coming. We will answer some every week. Now to get into our news and commentary section, we're going to start with Wizards of the Coast being Pinball Wizards. Well, Stern Pinball is here for you. Uh, we see more and more licensing of D&D, and now we have Stern Pinball showing off a new licensed D&D pinball machine called the Tyrant's Eye. What does the pinball machine do? It features the beholder Xanathar, master of the Cult of the Dragon, an emerging red dragon head, a gelatinous cube you can roll through, and more. What did you see in this video, Teos?
It's a lot of fun. I mean, I would love to own one of these pups. You
Mm-hmm.
could see how the dragon called Wrath can spit out pinballs. So the multi-ball is, the dragon breathing on you, pinballs. The gelatinous cube has a magnet, so not only do you roll through, but it can get trapped inside the gelatinous cube, right? Which is great. The board looks amazing. The video looks super fun. You choose a character at various points. It's one of these, if you've played sort of modern pinball games, they often have like a video screen you interact with and do things. And so this creates massive, higher complexity that you can unlock. So you can choose a character, which extends the benefits of things. So, like, there's a metal barrier that comes up between where the ball would normally drain, and that's called the shield. Well, the wizard gets it more often because you cast
Mm-hmm.
shield to pull up this metal barrier. Um,
Nice.
you choose where to travel, so there's a sort of map on the board that you roll over and light up, but then where you choose to travel will unlock different combinations. um, and one thing that's cool is the voices for this. Did you see this?
Yeah, Michael Dorn, who we all know as Worf in the Star Trek universe, Kevin Smith and Chris Pranosky, filmmakers, Luke Gygax, Critical Role cast members, My Chemical Romance singer Gerard Way is part of the cast, a longtime D&D fan, and even more.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a cast of thousands, if you will, for a pinball machine. And so when you buy yours, which are you going to buy,
Speaking
Teos?
speaking of thousands, the pro version is 7,000.
Mhm.
So I would say, folks, that's an appropriate gift for me. You can just stop there. But if
Okay.
you want to, you could also gift me the premium at 9,700. And we don't need to
Mhm.
worry about the limited edition, which is limited to 740 units, and the $13,000 price tag because it's apparently already sold out. So great.
Okay. If you could actually put tires on it and drive it, I would consider. But
I mean, you
I've,
could.
yeah, I'm gonna have to. make some friends who
Yeah.
can have this.
Yeah, I mean, I would love this in my game room, but nothing is gonna validate my spending 7,000 on
Now,
this.
if you have your gaming group of 7 people
It's
and you
true.
have your own special place to play,
Hmm.
chip in $1,000 each, and
There
then
you
you can
go.
buy it for your gaming group and invite Teos and I over.
Yes, absolutely. We'll be
There
there.
you go. Uh, so we go from pinball to anticipated role-playing games. Fans have voted on the 2025's most anticipated role-playing games on EN World. Let's do the countdown. We're going to start at number 10 with Starfinder 2E by Paizo. Number 9 is Alien Evolved from Free League. Number 8 is second edition of 13th Age from Pelgrane Press. Teos notes that this has been on the list for the last 3 years.
Yeah, it was
So
third place the last 2 years, and now it's eighth. So it just shows how folks have been waiting for this excitedly for quite some time.
yep. You want to do number 7, 6, and 5?
Sure. Number 7 is Coriolis the Great Dark by Free League, which I got to preview at Gamehole last year. Dolmen Wood is number 6 by Necrotic Gnome. It was also number 5 last year. And number 5 is Terry Pratchett's Discworld by Modifius.
Mm-hmm. Now, you might think that Draw Steel and Daggerheart would be 1 and 2, but they're not, surprisingly. Draw Steel by MCDM is number 4. Number 3 is Daggerheart from Darrington Press. Number 2, coming in with its huge Kickstarter success, is Cosmere by Brotherwise Games and Brandon Sanderson. And Teos, what is the number 1 most anticipated RPG of 2025?
It is Legend in the Mist by Son of Oak, based on the City of Mist game engine. That was one I had to read about. I didn't know anything about it, so clearly I need to
if
do
any
my
of those
work.
tickle your fancy, let us know why you are so anticipating it, and when it comes and you can start to play it, let us know what you think. Shannon Appelcline, RPG historian, did a 2024 year in review at designersanddragons.com. He does this every year, giving a state of D&D and role-playing games. Of the many topics he covered this year, we found his takes most interesting on the confusion between D&D's no AI stance for art, but its pro AI stance for DMing and D&D solutions, as communicated by Hasbro's CEO.
Who
And I
has a
think,
lot of people he plays with all the time in D&D.
right, those people must be all AIs. Uh, and as we note before, we don't, while we listen to what Chris Cox says as the CEO, president, whatever, of Hasbro, he is also not speaking to us.
No, he's
And
not.
and so, and so I take everything he says, especially when he is on an investor call, with a huge grain of salt, because he is lying in some way, either to them or to us. But that's sort of what CEOs do. So, tip of the
Yeah.
hat for that.
Yeah, I mean, lying. Yeah, I mean it is, but it's also it's the art of saying what you're considering, and you're almost fishing for the reaction from
Mhm.
investors to this long before you might actually do something. And yeah, so we'll see whether anything ever comes of this. There was Shannon links in this article to a number of stories that talk about this, and actually one of them I had not seen before, that went into kind of the types of DM assistance type tools that they're considering. It's hard to say whether they really have anything back there that they're working on. They seem to act like they do, but it's hard to say. Yeah, I don't make a whole lot of it, in part because things that someone may make that we don't even know if they'll succeed, I don't tend to worry about.
Right. And when we see AI, just the term AI, we get these visceral reactions, either as people who are anti-AI because of all the problematic nature of it,
Yeah, good for me. Mm-hmm.
right? Or pro AI because it's the cool thing. right? It's the new technology, so it must therefore be cool. And we have these instant reactions. Whereas if we said, hey, we're working on this thing that will allow your group to play D&D without a DM. If we don't say the words AI, we might be like, that's awesome.
Right.
We could play every week and it would be great. And we wouldn't have to prepare, we wouldn't have to pay all this money for books, and we could just sit down and play. But as soon as we put the AI moniker on that,
Sure.
it becomes evil,
Right.
or vice versa, right?
Sure.
You could say, here's this new great thing, and we'd say, no, oh, it's gotta be AI. Well, it's not AI. Oh, okay. It's hard to
Well,
sort it out.
I'd say that's because there's a big difference between saying, we're going to provide DMs with tables of resources and a smart system where when you're looking for a particular type of story, it would give you links to all of the different products we've created that speak to that, right? That's undeniably possibly cool, right? Like that is something I think we could all agree could be neat. It might work well. But when you say AI and you are a corporate head, I think we immediately assume, based on data, that this is probably hot air.
Sure.
And that they're just saying this as a, the same way they might talk about other business fundamentals, where we glaze over during some investment speak, because it's just nothing has to do with we're making cool toys. It's all, leveraging the synergisticals, and it's hot air. Right. And that's the problem when this AI title comes up. It's usually hot air that's just been bandied about to try to fish for interest in the company. Right.
Yeah. What other things does Shannon talk about?
He does a nice job of pointing out the challenge of being, as a company, pro fan and pro game with solutions like D&D Beyond, while also needing to serve corporate interests and revenue goals. So he points out that new technologies change that balance and create new challenges for a company to balance those things out, right? So having D&D Beyond or having the virtual tabletop are new challenges to how you blend that. Hey, I need to get books out the door, but also do things that fans want, right? And that's an old school balance we're used to seeing companies try to leverage. So, we generally say, when Tales of the Valiant came out with a monster manual, we don't then decry when Monster Vault 2 comes out. We go, yeah, companies are going to try to sell us another book, right? And we don't hate them for it. We understand it. Well, now there are these differences when it's like, well, but I've got to do the D&D Beyond version and market that because it's higher profit, and and so on and so forth. So he notes that, I think, very cleverly.
Yeah. Yep. He also looks at the state of role-playing games that are trying to compete with D&D, noting that there were large Kickstarters, and there may have been early signs of those D&D alternatives being much higher in 2023 than they are as we head into 2025. And I've noted a few times that we often see this, especially at times when Wizards of the Coast does something to upset, the audience, and then all of a sudden there's $1 million Kickstarter from this other company saying, "Come play our new game," which is basically D&D. And then when the sales numbers come in 2 years later, they're back down in the low range, whereas D&D just continues to grow.
Yeah. Yeah, he notes Pathfinder and kind of where it is today relative to where it was before, and so on. But I think even Monster Vault 2, which we'll talk about later, we'll mention later. But looking at where it is today, it's a slower uptick than not only because it's Monster Vault 2 versus 1, but also because I think that interest level starts going down when we get a little further away from the OGL outrage. Not that it isn't still there, and that conversing about it isn't valid, but that fans sort of change their perspectives a bit, and new fans come and go, and so on.
Yeah. And then Shannon also covers industry folk who passed away last year, talking about Jim Ward and Janelle Jaques and others. So all of that, again, is at designersanddragons.com. We get in the Business Insider an article I found very fascinating on the topic of running D&D for money.
Mm.
And it talks about Faraz Najid, who turned his D&D hobby into a thriving business in Singapore. And it covers, I think it covers very well, the whole article covers well this topic of D&D's growth, the problems, finding people to play with,
Hmm.
things to
Hmm.
run, and showing that whereas even 5 years ago, if someone said on some forum somewhere, yeah, I run D&D for money, you would get a lot of pushback from people who, well, I would never pay to play D&D. And you must be a horrible person if you charge money to run
Yeah.
D&D. And it's good to see that it is not just a need in society, but a way for people to make a living from this hobby by adding to the hobby rather than detracting from the hobby, rather than making hundreds of thousands of dollars on YouTube making shocked face videos. We have people who are actually playing the game, promoting the game, bringing people into the hobby and feeding a need, and I think a social good
Hmm. Hmm.
by providing this entertainment and interaction and socialization. Uh, so that's what caught
Mm.
my attention of this video, and how in Singapore they were able to grow this into a very profitable, large scale business.
Yeah, that's awesome. Really cool to see, uh, especially because of that international angle, right? That you can be kind of anywhere in the world and bring people together and make it cover your time, and then grow that to be 2, 3 tables. I forget what they mentioned in the piece, but that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now they have 41 game masters in this program running more than 180 games a month at their studio and in other pop-up spaces that they make. So, they've made a studio, they've made uh, a full-scale business where, right, instead of going to the arcade, you
Yeah.
go to this place and pay to play D&D.
Yeah. Absolutely fantastic. I love it.
And we also get some more details on D&D's Universal Fan Fest nights. Teos, what do we know about this?
Yeah, so Ian World noted that there was a kind of casting call for new cast members that would fill this out, right, to make this event happen. That's launching this spring for this D&D Fan Fest. The story focuses on Harper's and Xanathar the Beholder, and in fact, one of the casting call bits was for a performer to play Xanathar, where you have to push around this 30-pound beholder from a standing position, push it and pull it around as it does things. The casting call reveals that the D&D experience runs for about 45 minutes. The cast performs approximately 7 times per night. That gives you a feeling of kind of what the experience is like. We've got links to that and in the casting call itself. I think it paid just above $20 an hour. I forget exactly, 21, 27. I forget exactly. It was something like that. So you're not going to get rich on Xanathar, but I guess that's the problem. No word on whether you are called Stilgar. I don't know. Is that his fish? Still?
Yeah, still, yeah.
Yeah.
Now we need a casting call for the goldfish.
Yes.
And finally, let's get to our creator corner this week, starting with Will Doyle in The Guardian. Could it be? And it is. The Guardian has an article on the upcoming sci-fi horror video game Directive 8020. Friends of the show, Will Doyle and Stacey Allen, worked on this game. Will said the Earth is dying and humanity's last hope is a planet called Tau Zeta F. Yet, as the crew of the colony ship Cassiopeia survey the promising planet, they discover that they are not alone. Stalked by a horrifying alien organism that can chillingly mimic its prey, the crew of the Cassiopeia must outwit these predators and return home, with each former friend and crewmate now a potential threat. In other words, it's a playable blend of Alien and The Thing. Will is the game's creative director, and we have a link to the trailer in the show notes as well as that Guardian article.
Really cool to hear of this. I hope it's super successful. Will talked about the idea that, in horror, you don't want to, like, when you show a monster off, then it becomes immediately less horrifying now that you've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things they do in the game is change up how it can appear or reveal itself, I guess, because it can take the form of other things, so that it keeps this, because you don't know, even though you saw it once, you don't know what it'll look like the next time. I thought that was a really neat idea.
That is. And I mean, people know Will probably on the show from being, D&D creator. But he is also a video game director was and may still be with Supermassive Games,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
great games coming out of there as well. So check that out. We have Kobold Press launching Monster Vault 2, as Teos mentioned. This is for both Tales of the Valiant and 5e, providing over 300 new monsters. Friend of the show, Richard Green, worked on some of these, and I've seen other folks on social media saying that they have added to this project. So you can check out that Kickstarter right now. Link in our show notes. And this last thing, I don't know why it's even up here.
It's Shawn Merwin's design tips. So last year, Shawn posted a series of design tips. They have been collected with thankful permission by superstar Chad Lynch and are available as a Google Doc. Link in our show notes. Thank you, Chad, for gathering these together. Just a small taste of Shawn Merwin's brain. What could be better than that, Shawn?
Well, at Illithid's time to enjoy a small taste of my brain. They're about the only ones, and they've feasted quite well recently, I think.
Barely any brain left.
Exactly. Well, that was our news and commentary. Mm-hmm.